My name is Myra Collingwood. I'm 79 years old. I raised a son who once stood in front of our church congregation at age 10, stuttering through his first reading of Psalm 23, and made the whole sanctuary cry. His name is August. Today he's a best-selling author. And yesterday he sent me a text that said, "You're too old to understand. Please don't contact me again." That message came 5 minutes after I asked him why he'd posted a photo of me on Facebook, beneath a long, dramatic caption that read, "Raised by someone who saw emotions as weakness. I built myself in spite of her." It was accompanied by a slick headshot of him smiling, holding his new memoir titled, Hollow Roots, Escaping a Home That Never Felt Like Home. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The post had 43,000 likes, 800 comments, dozens of strangers praising him for escaping the toxicity, calling him brave for cutting out old baggage. Old baggage. That's me. I sat at my kitchen table for almost an hour after reading the post. The house was so quiet I could hear the tick of the oven clock and the wind rustling through the dogwood tree outside. The same tree I planted the year August was born. I picked up my phone and texted him. "Why would you write that? You know it isn't true. I loved you with everything I had." He didn't reply at first. Then he sent that single sentence. The one that finally burned the bridge. "You're too old to understand. Please don't contact me again." That was the moment something in me changed. Not broke, changed. Because for the first time in my life, I saw August not as the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, not as the teenager I drove to writing camps and SAT tutoring, not even as the man I helped through his first divorce. I saw him for what he'd become. A storyteller. A manipulator of truths. A man who turned his history into fiction and labeled it fact. And I remembered something I'd buried for decades. The journals. I had kept journals for 60 years. Small ones, leather-bound and tucked in boxes beneath my bed. I wrote down everything. Not out of paranoia. Out of survival. And in those journals was the real story. Not the polished narrative August sold on stages, but the raw, aching truth of what we lived through, together. His childhood illnesses. My 2 jobs. The sacrifices I made. The nights I went hungry so he could eat. The time I bailed him out when he was 21 after a bar fight. He pretended never happened. I never intended to share them. They were mine. My lifeline. But now he had made me a villain to the world. And I wasn't going to die letting his lie be the last word. So I made a decision. Bold one. August's book launch was scheduled for the following Friday. Downtown at the Lavelle Literary Theater. Open to the public. Press invited. Microphones. Cameras. And a Q&A at the end. I would be there. Not with anger. Not with vengeance. But with my voice. And my journal. Because sometimes you don't need to shout to tell the truth. You just need to read what was written when no one else was looking. And when that microphone came around to me, I wasn't going to ask a question. I was going to read. The truth he thought would stay buried. If this moment made your heart ache or burn with recognition, click that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. I started journaling the day August was born. Not out of some maternal instinct or desire to be poetic, but because I didn't have anyone to talk to. His father, Franklin, was gone before August's first birthday, chased his dreams to Nashville and never looked back. He sent one letter from a motel and a check that bounced. So I wrote to the page instead. That first journal was a slim, spiral notebook with cheap college-ruled lines. I wrote through spit-up stains, between diaper changes and graveyard shifts at the diner. I documented every time he smiled, every fever I prayed over, every night I curled around his crib whispering, "We're okay. We'll be okay." August never knew the sound of my sobs at 2 a.m. while washing uniforms in the bathtub. He only saw the warmth of my breakfast casseroles and the way I clapped when he brought home spelling bee trophies. He didn't know I pawned my mother's ring to buy his first laptop, or that the day he got accepted to Duke, I cried not just from pride, but from fear, because I knew once he left, he might never come back. And I was right. He left like a light switched off, sudden, clean, final. Calls became monthly, then yearly, then not at all. He wrote a few essays while in college. I clipped each one and saved it in a folder titled August's Brilliance. I still have it. It sits next to my tax returns and my living will. He never asked me to read his early work. Never sent me galleys of his first book. I found out it had been published from the woman at the post office. She said, "Did you know your son's a real big deal now?" He was on the radio last week, talking about growing up in a cold house. Smiled, nodded, went home and sat in the dark for a long time. That's the thing about people who rewrite history. They forget the ones who lived it too. I never told him what I sacrificed. That's not what mothers do. We give quietly. But that silence becomes a wound when it's twisted into neglect. One of the journal entries I reread before the launch was from 1994. August came home today, slammed the door, said I was suffocating him. He's 13. His voice cracked mid-sentence. He was crying even as he yelled. I made cocoa and left it outside his door. He didn't drink it. I flipped forward to another page. 2001. He called from college tonight. Sounded tired. Said he failed a test. I offered to send more money. He said, "No, Mom. You've done enough." I don't think he meant it cruelly, but it felt like a door locking. And then another, 2010. He's published now. Saw the interview. He called me a resilient single mother who had her own struggles. That's how he described me. I wonder what he thinks my struggles were. He's never asked. I had journals filled with these moments. Moments of tenderness, of hardship, of truth. And now, after decades of holding them like secrets, I was going to turn them into my voice. I spent the next few days selecting pages. Not the ones that made me look perfect. Not the ones that would earn sympathy. But the real ones. The ones that proved that love, deep, sometimes flawed, always human, was at the center of it all. On the day of the book launch, I wore the navy dress August had bought me for Mother's Day 12 years ago. Still fit, though I had to pin the neckline higher now. I arrived early, sat in the third row. Everyone around me buzzed about how raw and groundbreaking his book was. He walked on stage to a standing ovation. Gray suit. Clean shave. The charisma of a man who'd been praised too often for being brave, and never challenged on being truthful. He opened with a story from the book, a charming, crowd-pleasing tale about how he learned to be independent from a young age, growing up with a distant mother who cared in ways that never felt like love. Laughter. Applause. I sat with my hands folded over the journal in my lap. Then came the Q&A. The moderator held up the mic. "Anyone have a question for Mr. Collingwood?" I raised my hand. When the mic was passed to me, he still hadn't noticed who I was. Understood. And I said, clear and steady, "I don't have a question. I have a journal." He blinked. The crowd shifted. "I'm Myra Collingwood," I said. "August's mother." Silence. Uncomfortable. He froze. And I opened the book. May 13th, 1988. August stayed home sick. I called out of work, lost a shift. We watched The Iron Giant together. He laughed so hard at the train scene, milk came out his nose. I told him that night, "You are my joy." He didn't remember, but I never forgot. Few people gasped. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." I read another. June 2nd, 1999. August's application to writing camp got rejected. He cried. I told him, "This isn't the end, baby. It's the beginning." I sold my wedding china to buy him a spot at another one. And another. July 4th, 2012. He came home for 3 days. Ate my cooking, kissed my cheek, left without saying goodbye. I sat on the porch until midnight, watching the fireworks alone. August's face had drained of color. The moderator tried to interrupt, but I kept going. He says I was cold. I wasn't. I was tired. I was doing everything. I was surviving while raising a boy who didn't yet understand what survival costs a woman. Closed the book. And I looked at him, really looked at him. "I didn't come here to shame you," I said. "I came here to remind you that your truth isn't the only one that matters." Then I handed the journal to the moderator and left. I didn't wait for applause. Didn't wait for him to come after me. I walked into the afternoon sun like a woman carrying her own story for the first time. If this moment left you breathless, if you've ever wanted to speak your truth out loud, now's your moment. Like this video, drop a comment below and hit subscribe. The moment I stepped out of the building, I felt my knees wobble. Not from regret, but from release. For the first time in my life, I had said what needed saying, not in whispers to myself behind closed doors, not in long letters never mailed, but out loud to the one person who spent years pretending I didn't have a voice worth listening to. I didn't expect a standing ovation. But I also didn't expect what came next. I hadn't even reached the parking lot when a young woman rushed after me. "Mrs. Collingwood?" she asked, breathless. Turned. She looked about 30, maybe less. Thin frame, short cropped hair. Her eyes brimming with something halfway between disbelief and reverence. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. That was the most honest thing I've ever heard at a book event. And blinked. "You were inside." She nodded. "I was one of the early readers for the publisher. His version of you always felt off, cold, almost cartoonish. But what you read," her voice cracked, "that was love." I didn't know what to say. She hugged me without asking permission. And in that hug something healed, not just in her but in me. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of anxiety. Out of clarity. My phone buzzed just after midnight. August. I stared at the name for a long time before answering. His voice was small. Not the booming, performative voice he used for interviews or book tours. It was small. "Mom. I'm here." Beat of silence. "I didn't know you kept journals. I didn't know you forgot so much." More silence. Then, "I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone would take it that seriously." That made me flinch. Not because he didn't mean it, but because he still didn't get it. "August," I said slowly, "you made a career out of telling people I was a ghost in your story. But I was the one who turned the lights on. I was the one who kept the roof over your head and the heat on in winter." "I didn't lie," he insisted. "That was my truth." "Then your truth is missing too many pages," I replied. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. I just let the stillness speak louder than the words we'd been hurling at each other for years. He finally said, "I don't know how to fix it." And that's when I said something I never thought I would. "You can't." He was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "Then what do I do?" Thought about that. About what I would have wanted from him years ago. About what I wanted now. And I said, "You tell the rest of the story." The next day, I mailed him 2 more journals. One from his teenage years, the other from college. Not to shame him. To show him. To show him how much I was there. How much I caught. How much I held. How often I put myself second so he could learn to fly. 3 days passed. Then 4. On the 5th day I received an email. Subject line: New acknowledgement page draft. Inside was a copy of his publisher's letterhead. A new preface. It read, "I wrote this book to share my truth. But I left out hers. My mother, Myra Collingwood, didn't just raise me, she saved me over and over. What I once called distance was quiet resilience. What I mistook for coldness was exhaustion wrapped in love. This story isn't whole without her." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen until tears blurred the words. He hadn't erased the old version of the story. But he'd added the rest. It was a start. Later that week, I received a call from his publisher. They were planning a follow-up event. A public conversation between August and me. He'd requested it. Said it was time to correct the record. I declined. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. I didn't need a spotlight. I already had a garden full of sun. And a shelf full of journals that didn't need anyone's approval to be real. But I did one thing before I closed the email. I replied with a single sentence. "I'm glad you're learning to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful comeback isn't vengeance. It's being heard. And letting them carry the weight of what they once buried." If this moment stirred something inside you, if you've ever fought to be remembered rightly, go ahead and like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. A week after the launch, I went to the post office to pick up a package. Same as always. 3rd window, same woman behind the glass who called me Miss Myra, even though I hadn't been a miss in 5 decades. She leaned over the counter when she saw me. "I saw you on the internet," she said, eyes wide. "You're the one who stood up at that book event, right?" I smiled faintly. "That's me." She grinned. "Well, you didn't just stand up. You stood out. People are still talking about it." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I didn't do it for attention. But attention came anyway. By the time I got home, there were 6 emails in my inbox. 2 from strangers who said they saw the clip on social media. Someone had recorded my reading. Another from a woman in Ohio whose son had written her out of his life. One more from a retired teacher who said she hadn't spoken to her daughter in 4 years. They all said the same thing. "Thank you." I thought I was the only one. And just like that, my pain became something else. Mirror. A hand extended. A ripple in a still pond. A local reporter from the Thatcher County Chronicle reached out, asking to do a feature on "The Woman Who Made a Bestseller Tell the Truth." I laughed at the title. Politely declined. I told her the story had already been told. Just not the way they expected. But then something happened that made me stop laughing. A woman named Caroline showed up at my door. She was 28, short hair, long coat, and a journal clutched in her hand. "I'm sorry to come uninvited," she said. But I didn't know who else to talk to. Turns out, she'd read August's book and resonated with it. She too had cut her mother out of her life. Thought it was the healthy thing. But after watching the video of me at the launch and hearing my words, she'd gone back and reread her own mother's letters. There were so many things I didn't see, she said. So many stories I refused to hear. She was crying by then. I guess I came to say, your voice helped me want to hear hers. She handed me the journal. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to say this to my mom. But I wrote it down. Maybe that's a start. She left me standing there, holding a piece of her sorrow folded into pages. Later I placed it beside my own journals. Because sometimes healing isn't about fixing relationships. Sometimes it's about telling the truth out loud so someone else can recognize their own. August emailed again the next day. He'd been invited to appear on a national talk show to discuss the complexities of memoir, family, and memory. They wanted him to bring me, to recreate the moment. He asked if I'd consider it. I thought long and hard, and I said no. But not because I wasn't proud. 'Cause I was done being a moment. I was a lifetime. That Sunday I spoke at my writing group instead. We held our session in the community center auditorium, because there were too many newcomers for the library basement. I read from a fresh page. Not from the past. From the present. I am not just a mother. I am not just a background character in someone else's hero's journey. I am a woman who wrote her way through loneliness, fear, and sacrifice. And I will not let my story be rewritten by someone who wasn't brave enough to ask me what really happened. The room clapped. Not loud. Not forced. It was the kind of applause that wraps around you like a shawl. And afterward, someone asked me if I'd ever considered publishing my journals. I'd never considered it before. But now I thought maybe. Not to prove a point. Not to get revenge. But to tell the truth. So other women like me could say, that was me too. If this moment gave you strength or reminded you of your worth, hit that like button, leave your story in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I published my first book the week I turned 80. It wasn't flashy. No press tour. No launch party. No morning show appearances. Just a matte cover, a small stack of paper, and my name, Myra Collingwood, printed in soft gold script across the front. Title: The Things I Never Said Out Loud. Inside were excerpts from my journals. Memories. Letters I'd written to myself in the dark. Stories I'd hidden under my mattress when the world told me I had nothing worth writing. It sold exactly 127 copies in the first month. I cried over every single one. Not because of the numbers, but because people were reading me. Not a version. Not a shadow. Not a footnote in someone else's fame. Me. A librarian in Charleston emailed and asked for 10 signed copies for a book club she ran for widows. A granddaughter in Tulsa mailed me a picture of her and her grandmother reading it together on a porch swing. A woman in Oregon wrote a blog post titled, "I found my mother in a stranger's journal." Each note, each message, each photo proved something I had long suspected but never dared to say. My story mattered. Even if no one clapped when I told it. Even if it was quiet. Even if I was old. August didn't call after the book came out. But I knew he saw it. He posted less after that. Less storytelling, more silence. No more posts about escaping my childhood. No more dramatic captions about rising above. He was still successful, still praised, still adored by strangers. But something in his tone shifted. One day his publicist called. Said August had decided to donate a portion of his book sales to a non-profit supporting single mothers. She asked if I'd consider attending the press conference. Said no. But I sent a thank you note. 2 lines handwritten. Truth doesn't need a podium. Just needs time. I'm glad you're learning. Weeks later I got a package at my door. No return label. But I knew the handwriting. Inside was the first edition of Hollow Roots, his memoir, the one that started it all. Except the inside cover had been altered. A new dedication page taped in, hand-typed. To the woman I misunderstood until it was too late. You didn't just raise me. You carried me. And I'm still learning how much that cost you. He signed it. Not as August Collingwood, author. Just August, my son. I placed the book on the shelf next to mine. Not because his version had finally aligned with mine, but because both stories now existed side by side. And that, more than any apology, was what I wanted. Years from now, someone will open those 2 books and read the same names, the same memories from different angles. They'll see how truth bends depending on where you stand, but how love, when it's real, keeps showing up even after the ink dries. I don't want revenge. I want recognition. And I got it. In my own name. On my own page. And that, my darling, is what freedom looks like. If this story gave you chills, tears, or the courage to reclaim your own voice, please like this video, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Stories that remind us that it's never too late to speak up, and that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply being heard.